Well, this is Joe Stewart, the Vice President for Governmental Affairs, the Independent Insurance Agents of North Carolina. We're very fortunate today to have State Senator Natasha Marcus, the Democratic nominee for Insurance Commissioner in the 2024 election. Senator, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Joe. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, absolutely. And thank you for taking time to spend a few minutes to talk to the agent community of North Carolina. Of course, our members very interested in this particular race on the ballot this year. And why don't you start? Give us a little background, what your biography is, the things you think are important for voters to consider as they look at you as a candidate for insurance commissioner.
Right. So I have been campaigning now since I won the Democratic nomination in the primary. Proud to say I won all 100 counties. I think I'm the only council state candidate that did that. So I've been campaigning since December 2023, and I've been meeting with voters everywhere, literally Murphy to Manio. We have been, and I have found that most folks have no idea who Mike Causey is. They don't know what the insurance commissioner does. And they certainly don't know that this one person has sole authority in the state of North Carolina to set the maximum rate that insurance companies can charge us for property, auto, and workers' comp insurance. Their eyes kind of widen when they hear, like, wait, what? One person has all that power? And I say, yes. And I explained that Mike Causey has been in this statewide elected office now for 8 years. And the fact that so few people have heard of him or heard from him shows me that he has not been an active advocate for the people of our state. They just don't know who he is and what he does. But they have heard, to the extent they've heard about him, they have heard about the scandals. His private driver that he pays as a deputy commissioner, driving him as far away as New Mexico on taxpayer expense. That made headlines, and they do know that about him. And the make work jobs for his political allies, etc. Some people know about the regional offices that he's closed. Some of them were very popular regional offices that were meant to provide consumer services across the state, and how he moved them to the more rural areas of our state near the homes of his friends and campaign staffers so that they could run those offices, even though they are not insurance experts. And so folks are a little bit angry about that, honestly, regardless of party. I think North Carolinians don't appreciate that kind of mismanagement of a state agency. And then, of course, I'm sure it's no surprise to you or your members, they are mad that their insurance rates keep going up. So I don't need to tell them that. They have noticed that. So many people have come to me and said, why did my rates go up this year? I haven't even filed a claim. Some of them complain about being dropped from their insurance carrier, even, they've been good, loyal customers for years and years paying premiums. And so a lot of them are shocked to hear about what consent to rate is and what a huge loophole that has become. They're mad when I explain it to them, and they understand they're now being charged more than the maximum rate as set by the state of North Carolina. And when I've talked to a few insurance agents, I go to insurance agents' offices. I'm happy to come to any of your members who would like to invite me. One of the big things I hear about for folks who work with seniors is the scammers, the folks who call seniors and persuade them on certain Medicare policies against their best interest in violation of some state laws. So those are kind of some of the things that I've been hearing a lot that I'm trying to educate people about. And when they hear that the current commissioner has not held a single public rate hearing in his entire 8 years in office, when they hear and said that what he does is meet privately with the rate bureau without any public transparency, and agrees time and time again after those meetings to raise our rates 16 times so far, with more coming on the horizon. People are angry. They know about this proposed 42% statewide average rate hike coming, and they're worried. Wallets are getting squeezed right now in a way that makes people really uncomfortable. You can't go without insurance. So they often say to me, well, doesn't he have to explain himself? Why isn't he required to hold a public hearing? Does anyone hold him accountable for that? And I say, you, the voters, hold him accountable for that. Once every 4 years, you get a chance to make a decision about who your insurance commissioner is going to be. I tell them about what consent to rate means, how to look for those hidden kind of hidden, in my opinion, CTR disclaimers that are in the bill that, got to go to the very last page to read that, and understand what that means and how they should contact their independent agent if they get hit with a CTR notice and find a new policy that won't charge them in excess of the rate. There was one woman in particular who was so grateful. She wrote me a handwritten note and said, "Thank you so much for telling me about that," because I went home and checked, and sure enough, there was that notice in my at the end of my bill. I had no idea. And I've now saved $600 on a better policy. So they talk about Medicaid expansion and how grateful folks are. There was just an announcement today. Governor Cooper announced that so many more people, 500,000 North Carolinians, have already signed up for Medicaid expansion. That's been great for our state. I believe it will reduce the insurance costs for everybody by having fewer uncompensated care claims in our hospitals statewide, keep rural hospitals open, and of course, is the right thing to do for people's health. And I guess the last thing I would mention is that I am making sure that people understand, as I talk to them about all these issues, that I'm running a people-funded campaign. I'm not taking insurance company money, because I don't want to have any kind of conflict of interest about who I represent. When I'm elected by the people of North Carolina, I want to know, and I want them to know, that I'm going to do what's right for them. Unlike my opponent, I am not relying on insurance company money to get elected. I want to be in a position to work for the people of North Carolina, foster a vibrant marketplace of insurance options so that they earn their reasonable profit that they're entitled to. That's what they're allowed to, make a reasonable profit. We want them to, so they'll write policies here, but they're not supposed to be allowed to be making exorbitant profits and record profits. We want independent agents like your members to be able to have lots of options to offer their customers who are shopping for insurance. And then, of course, we want people to know that they're not going to have to pay a single penny more than what is absolutely necessary to protect themselves. So I think independent agents have a big role to play in that. I look forward to being our next commissioner of insurance and working on behalf of the people of our state.
Well, as you've traveled the state and talked to consumers, sounds like you've gotten a lot of good feedback from people's perspective on this office and some of the concerns that they have specifically. And you've been very gracious in accepting our offers in the past to come on and talk about your perspective on these issues. And one of the things we've talked about before, and you probably now, after having been on the campaign trail, have seen and been witness to it more, the hard market conditions currently for the insurance marketplace, a very difficult challenge some property owners on the coast are facing, with a significant increase in premium. We all hear about the inflationary pressures on premium and the fact that there have been more very large natural disaster events, not just hurricanes as we think of those here, but even things like drought. I just read a report. There's an expected increase in the average annual rainfall in much of the United States over the next 25 years. So we may have more just traditional downpour types of claims that come about as a result. So having had all of this and an opportunity to think about it as insurance commissioner, should you be fortunate enough to win in November, what are the things you think that you can do in that role to try to help address these hard market conditions here in North Carolina?
Right. It is a complicated balancing act. So many factors going into it. I have talked with so many people who are worried about whether they're going to be able to afford insurance, whether insurance is going to be available to them. I'll start by saying, I know that the insurance companies, I've heard it time and time again, love to cry poverty, saying that, they're about to go bankrupt if we don't raise rates, et cetera. And they blame factors like inflation, which, by the way, has been cooling for several months now. We don't see them lowering their rates when inflation rates are cooling. So they use this in part to justify rate hikes, and it may be to a certain extent valid. But we know that insurance companies are making record profits, and that at least here in North Carolina, insurance rates are spiking much faster than the rate of inflation. So they can't just say, oh, it's inflation, we can't help it, etc. They often also point to climate change impacts, which, for the record, I want to acknowledge is that it is absolutely real. Climate change is already happening. It's already impacting our state in a myriad of ways, including chronic flooding in our low-lying areas. People don't think about that, but we have a lot of low-lying areas in our state and a really big coastline compared to most states. We're seeing mudslides in the mountains. So even in Western North Carolina, where sometimes people think that they're protected from the impact of climate change as if it's all just hurricanes, but they're seeing mudslides more and more often. And then, of course, we got sea level rise on the coast. But that is not all that is to blame for this hard market and the rising premiums that people are being forced to pay. So I mentioned earlier that Mike Causey, in his 8 years in this position, has refused to hold a single public rate hearing. He has held just to clarify, because I've been asked this, he's held the public listening sessions, I call them, where he's not even present. I was present, he was not, but he opens up the room at the Department of Insurance and lets people come in and say why they're opposed to a rate hike. But that's just them speaking. There's no back and forth. There's no data presented by insurance companies or the rate bureau at that. That's just a kind of a listening session to get public comment. What I'm talking about is he has never held a single public rate hearing. So he has never forced these insurance companies through the rate bureau to come in a public forum and show us their data to prove why they need a rate hike. They don't have to justify it in any way. They're not showing us what their actual profits are, what their claims actually paid out were in our state, their executive salaries, their revenue, et cetera. So otherwise, they don't have to disclose this information. And guess what? They don't want to. They would really rather not share that information with the public. And so they love it that Mike Causey continues to give them cover. He just meets privately. We don't know what they talk about. That's not public record. And he agrees to some higher rate. He calls it, a compromise. He likes to feel like he should get some kudos because it's never quite as high as what they ask for. But of course, they ask for the moon. And then so anything less than that, he acts like, well, look, I'm such a good negotiator. I've gotten you a better deal. You don't need to know the details. Just know that I got you a good deal. And I think people are done with that. And keeping this information secret, the secrecy, I think is bad and is a huge dereliction of what I see as one of the biggest jobs of the Commissioner of Insurance. So I said that these insurance companies are making record profits. How do we know this? The New York Times, if you've been following the reporting that the New York Times has been digging into this across the nation to figure out what are insurance companies really making in profits from state to state and doing some really good reporting, comparing. And so I dug into those reports. There's a series of them in the New York Times. I encourage your members to look at them if they haven't. And their reporting shows that these insurance companies made a hefty profit on homeowners policies, specifically the ones that they most cry foul about, in North Carolina every single year over every year of the past decade, except 1 year. That was the year that 3 major storms all happened in pretty short succession. But every other year, they made hefty profits. And these companies are then using the profits that they make in North Carolina that are quite high to offset their losses in other states. If you dig into that data, like Arkansas, Iowa, and other interior states where they are losing money. The New York Times specifically said, and here's a quote, I got to read it here. The data shows that homeowners insurance was unprofitable in 18 states last year, up from 8 states in 2013. And in the state of North Carolina, as I said, profitable every year over the past decade, including last year, even though there was a lot of storms, and except one year. So let's dig into a little more, which I've done. The reporting also shows that in coastal counties, which you mentioned, Joe, in North Carolina, homeowners' rates are significantly higher than their risk factors justify. Higher than the risk factors justify. So they're, again, overcharging North Carolina consumers. Mike Causey keeps allowing rates to increase. So Carteret County, for example, New York Times shows is paying 99% more than other places with the same risk. New Hanover County paying 67% more than other places with the same risk. Hyde County, 51% more than other places with the same risk. And it goes on and on and on. So my question is, rates are going up. Instead of what do we have? Our current Commissioner of Insurance just seemed to say, oh, I don't know. It's not my fault. I'm making you as good a deal as I can. We don't want to run the insurance companies off. Maybe it's climate change. I don't buy it. There are things he could and should be doing. And why isn't he fighting harder to protect North Carolinians? We should not be offsetting the losses that these insurance companies are suffering in other states. Mike Causey's job, the insurance commissioner's job, is to look out for North Carolinians. He's not holding the public hearings. He's not requiring that they provide this proof under oath, subject to, supposed to be his cross-examination, aided by the staff at the Department of Insurance, the actuaries and others who could dig into this data and make sure that rates don't go up. And why hasn't he? He's gotten himself into a pickle, Joe, because he relies on the insurance industry sources to fund his reelection campaigns. So he needs them on his side in order to keep his job. They ask for a rate hike, he's inclined to agree and not make them show their cards in public. And that's a shame, because he has forgotten what the job is supposed to be and who he's supposed to be representing. Again, I'll just restate it. I am not taking insurance industry money in my campaign. I don't want that conflict of interest. I want to work for the people of North Carolina. We just posted the biggest mid-year finance report of any commissioner of insurance candidate of either party ever without insurance company money. In fact, 91% of our money raised in that period came from individual donors, small dollar donors, and they want a commissioner of insurance who's going to work for the people. You asked specifically about the reinsurance market. I don't want to skip that part because I do think it's important. I know that's a factor. The Guy Carpenter ROL index is trending up. We all know that. And one state can't do that much to move the needle on these global forces, right? They're at work there. They're not just nationwide, they're global. But there is one thing that we can do better. We should be doing better in North Carolina, and that is to be better prepared to deal with the impacts of climate change. I think that's key because reinsurance companies don't like to take excessive risks, and they prefer states that are not sticking their head in the sand as the sea level is rising, refusing to take steps to mitigate. Mike Causey, again, the current commissioner of insurance, he's part of the party here in North Carolina that he doesn't talk about climate change. They deny it's even happening in many cases. I've never heard him talk about it. Makes no efforts really to urge us to prepare for these impending storms and the impacts that we're having. Again, chronic flooding in the low-lying areas, mudslides in Western North Carolina, houses falling into the ocean on the coast. And I have great respect for what Gina Hardy's doing. I think that's a really important part to keep what was known as the beach plan and the fair plan solvent and working as well as they have been, so that there is an insurer of last resort available when needed. We need to expand that fortified roof program so that wind damage is mitigated, lowers insurance claims, gives consumers a rebate on their insurance bill. I don't know why that hasn't been promoted more by our current commissioner of insurance. It's growing, but at a slow rate. We got to speed that up because storms are coming. We need to increase more insurance options for consumers. I think Mike Causey's been pretty passive on trying to get more insurance companies to do business here. There are companies that do business in our neighboring states and not here. Why not? Our previous commissioner of insurance would do a much better job in meeting with those insurance companies and figuring out how to get them to come, work with the Department of Commerce here in North Carolina and get them to come in North Carolina so people have more options. That brings prices down. So important that we modernize our North Carolina building codes. As a senator, I have fought against the efforts to block the updating of our building codes when we are not building new homes to energy efficient, fuel efficient standards and to be resistant to the big storms that come. We're sticking our head in the sand and not dealing with it. There's more. I feel like I've been going on too long, but it all impacts this, what you call the hard market, or the reinsurance market, the ability to get companies to offer policies here, the ability for them to get their insurance that they need, flood insurance is part of it, et cetera. So we just need a more active insurance commissioner who understands that climate change is real, how to deal with that, and who will work for the people.
Well, let's pivot to talk about something that's been discussed at the legislature in recent months, the reinsurance facility, the way that the state handles higher risk auto and vehicle liability coverage in the state. A very large portion of the marketplace is in the reinsurance facility. Some legislative concern about that fact and wanting to know why that mechanism is as big as it is in North Carolina. We've talked about this a little before in other discussions that we've had, but now with a little time on the trail and an opportunity to look more thoroughly at it, any thoughts on the auto market and things that you would want to see done as insurance commissioner there?
Yeah, Joe, so you did ask the same question pretty much of all the candidates during the primary election, and I answered your question, and I also went back to watch the videos and see what the other candidates said. And I noticed when you asked the incumbent insurance commissioner, who also worked for the insurance companies as a lobbyist before his current job, what he thought. And I was very interested to see that he was unable to offer any policy recommendations at all. He literally said, I don't know the answer. And then he said only, well, something like, he's heard a lot of complaints about that from agents. So it really makes me wonder why after 8 years on the job, he does not have any answer at all to this issue, which is clearly important to you and your members because you're bringing it up again. I've not served as North Carolina Commissioner of Insurance, so it's hard for me to give an insider's answer on a kind of tricky policy question, right? We have an unusual system here, as you noted. There are obvious pros, but also possibly some cons to the system we have. It is unique, some say antiquated, but it is providing lower insurance rates as compared to other states that have different systems for handling their high-risk drivers. So we know auto insurance rates are lower here than in, I think, certainly almost all of our surrounding states. So that tells me it's working to a certain extent, and I'm not ever going to be an advocate for change just for change's sake, and say, let's eliminate a system that seems to be working well, both for consumers, keeping rates low. But that said, I think there has been some discussion about some smart targeted tweaks, more questions really than answers. I noticed in the House committee that wanted to dig into this. I don't know that anyone really had a better way to do it here in North Carolina. There was some talk about how the facility may be benefiting risky drivers, expensive safe drivers. So if so, we really need to dig in to know the extent of that, if there is some inequity there, and work to alleviate that, because I do believe we should be incentivizing safe drivers and raising rates on the riskier drivers. If that seems fair to me, if you're going to drive in a way that causes injury to yourself and others, then maybe your rates need to go up a little bit, and that might get you to hit that brake pedal some, right? We got to make sure basically the drivers pay their fair share of insurance based on their driving habits. So, the other thing I noticed was there was the general manager of the facility herself. She said that Clean Risk should be paying about, in her opinion, 70% more than what they're paying. So if this is true, I would support delving into that. I'd love to know your recommendation or your members' recommendation at the Big I, if you have them. I'm sure you have given it a lot of thought. Again, I would be cautious about making any big changes to a system that seems to be providing the right kinds of, more affordable rates than in other states. That to me, interesting that you've asked it again, because it is not a question that has come up on the campaign trail. Not a single voter at just a regular, town hall type setting has asked about that. Instead, they are asking more about the things I mentioned earlier about what does Commissioner of Insurance do? What is the job? Why are my rates going up even though I haven't filed a claim? What is consent to rate? And why is that allowed? And why aren't there public hearings? If that's what we would expect to see, why is that happening? That doesn't seem fair. Those kinds of questions, those are the ones I'm getting on the campaign trail more.
Well, Senator, thank you for taking time for being with us today. We're going to give you the final minute, look into the camera and make the case for the folks out there to support you for insurance commissioner. The time is yours.
All right, thank you. So North Carolina is one of only 11 states in the nation where the people of the state have an opportunity to elect their commissioner of insurance. Most states, it's an appointed position. So here, that gives a lot of power to the people of our state to say, we want this person to advocate for us. This is the person we trust to work for us. And I think for the past 8 years under Mike Causey, he has demonstrated that he is not focused on what's best for the people who are in a position to make this choice. We need reliable, affordable insurance. And I have a proven record of working for the people of the state as a state senator. Before that, I was a litigation attorney. I know how to advocate for my clients. I feel quite certain I would do this job better than the current commissioner of insurance with the right focus. Unlike Mike Causey, I'm not accepting campaign contributions from insurance company PACs. I'm not a former lobbyist for the very companies that the insurance commissioner is trusted to regulate and to hold in check. And instead, I've been a strong advocate for the people. I think it's time for a change. I am running to lead a state department that directly impacts the wallets of almost all North Carolinians. I'd be honored to earn the support of your members, answer any further questions you have. I look forward to attending your conference coming up. I think it's next month, and answer any questions there in person. Want to make myself available. I know your agents understand how important it is for folks to have the options that they need, the coverage that they need. I look forward to working in cooperation with you, with your organization and your members. I want to reinstate the Agents Advisory Committee that existed under the previous Commissioner of Insurance, so I can hear directly from agents about what's happening on the ground, so I can be a better Commissioner of Insurance during my term. And I hope that the voters will give me an opportunity to fight for you. I'll be an honest and frugal steward of the taxpayer money and running the Department of Insurance. So thank you for the time. Thank you for the good questions. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
State Senator Natasha Marcus, the Democratic candidate for insurance commissioner. And yes, indeed, you will be joining us at 2024 Insure Expo in Winston-Salem coming up in September. Appreciate your willingness to come talk to our members at that live event. I will include information on this video on our website for all of the members who want to access this after the recording is completed. And so I'll include the website, your website, campaign website, so people have access to that.
NatashaMarcus.com. It's easy to remember. I hope folks will go there. There is much more information there.
Senator, thank you so much for taking time today.
Thank you, Joe. Have a great day.